Hi guys, and welcome to Samsung Now. Samsung Now is where we look at the latest from Samsung, we review the latest and greatest from Samsung, and we discuss events, things, anything that's kind of related directly or indirectly with Samsung and their products. Today, at last, we're going to be looking at this little lovely behind me. It's the Samsung KS9000 if you're in the US, but if you're in the UK, it's the UEKS8000. First thing that annoys me about Samsung, and Samsung are not the only ones that do this, but why call it something very different in the US than you do in the UK or Europe? Especially when there's a KS8000 in the US, which is the KS9000 in the UK. It doesn't make any sense. So just to clarify, this is the KS9000 if you're in the US, the one below the very top one. And if you're in the UK, it's the KS or the UEKS8000, above the 7000 and below the 9000. Confused? Yeah, you're not the only one, I'm sure. Okay, let's get to it. This is a 4K amazing screen. It's a 65-inch, the one I've got behind me. It's uses, now I've written all this down, so I'm going to just rattle it off and I'm going to sort of go over some of the things in a bit more detail. 4K TV, it's HDR. It's it was one of the very first TVs actually to get Ultra HD Premium. And the reason it was called Ultra HD Premium was because it was one of the very first TVs that reached the peak level brightness overall of 1000 nits, which is what's required to reach that sort of standard in image quality that I believe Dolby required to have it be allowed to be referenced as an Ultra HD Premium TV. As a note, as a side note, the new Samsung TVs that came out this year are fundamentally not that different from this one. Uses the same OS, very similar controllers, breakout box, very similar panel. The only difference is that instead of 1000 nits, it's 1500 nits. So it's just that half again more brighter. Considering how bright this is when it's really cranking up and I'm watching a movie, you don't really need it to be much brighter. You know, it's kind of, there are times where I'm having to sort of shield my eyes because it is so bright. So let's just get on with some of these facts. So it uses the Tizen OS, which is great. It works perfectly well for the TV. It's got a smart hub, which means it's a breakout box that runs through a cable that stops you sort of wrestling behind the TV to sort of get to the main things. It's got 4 HDMIs, and I believe all of those allow pass-through. They're all 4K compatible. How this works with HD content is really good. Really good. It upscales to 4K effortlessly. There are no artifacts. You don't really see. It's hard in a way, unless you're comparing side by side what 4K is as opposed to say HD being upscaled to 4K. It's such a good TV for that. So in essence, you know, even just on high definition content being upscaled to 4K, it's really, really good. It has a native refresh rate of 120 Hz, which is pretty cool, but it does also have this this supreme motion rate at 240 Hz, and it has a few other things that sort of cleans up some of the noise and what have you. Not that you get much, but when you put those on, and you'll see in the settings, because I've go through all the settings as you'll see in this video, it kind of makes things a bit plastic. That kind of, you know, yeah, it's great to have this fluid motion, this sort of 240 Hz feel to it, but in movies and in TV, it just feels odd. And I'm not sure if I'm the only one that feels that way, and if I'm not, comment below and let me know what you think. But to me, all that kind of additional stuff, you know, which is great for TVs to do, and a lot of people like it. But for me, you know, I kind of don't want all that fakery added on to a HD or 4K content, because it makes the content seem a little bit plastic. It seems a bit artificial. So I tend to remove that. And one other thing to note is that at the end of this video, I'll be showing you the settings that I have that work well for me in terms of how I've set how I've calibrated the TV. The resolution, obviously, it's, you know, 3840 by 2160, so it's a 4K panel. It has wireless connectivity, so you don't have to wire it up, but I would kind of recommend, you know, connecting the Ethernet to it. Now, as a good point, the breakout box doesn't serve the Ethernet cable, so you actually have to plug the Ethernet cable directly into the back of the TV. So that's another cable that may be running down if you're doing it that way. The remotes, now you all know my complaint I have about the Samsung remote that comes with this. In fact, let's just get the one that I'm complaining about, if I can find it. Oh, there it is. This is the one, my little rattle. Yeah, awful remote. Great idea, and works well when it's working, but it doesn't work that often. So you're always fiddling around with making sure the batteries haven't fallen out, and also making sure it's reconnected properly, because it uses Bluetooth, so it loses that connection quite often. So yeah, you know, if you're spending a lot of money on a TV, and you can watch my video where I'm ranting about the quality of this remote, you know, it's something they could have addressed very easily. So it has four HDMI 2.0A ports, so there's enough bandwidth to push through on the 4K content. 3 USB ports, 1 Ethernet port, which is on the back of the TV, 1 component port, again on the back of the TV, 1 composite port, which I believe is not on the breakout box, 1 audio out and 1 digital audio out. Yeah, so in terms of sound, you've got 2 20-watt and 2 10-watt speakers, which are downward firing. One of the things I want to sort of mention about downward firing speakers, first of all, if you're placing this on a wall or any similar TV that has downward firing speakers, make sure you're using a sound bar. Because what's going to happen is that these TVs, or recent TVs that have downward facing speakers, require a hard, shiny surface, ideally glass, to fire off from. If you don't have that, what's going to happen if you've got it on a wall, all it's going to do is fire downwards, and you're going to lose a lot of that clarity in terms of dialogue on films and just TV in general. You're just going to lose an awful lot, and it's going to become very muffled and mumbled, which is a very common complaint for downward firing speakers on more recent TVs. Really, if you're spending this kind of money on a TV anyway, you're going to want a sound bar. Really, at the very least, you're going to want a sound bar. So, you know, if you're spending that kind of money, do yourself a favor and get a sound bar. It also has a contrast ratio of 6,545 to 1, which is huge. Its black levels are incredible. I had the TV before this, below this rather, it's sort of its lower brother, lower model. Lower brother, what am I talking about? And there was a real difference in the quality of the blacks. So if you can afford it, go for the middle of the range one, which is this, or you know, or if you can go for the top one, great. But there isn't a lot of difference between the top one and this. So the black levels are really black. They're dark, they're deep. There's no bleed. There's not a lot of bleed that you're getting. So, you know, if you can do that, if you can go for this one at least, then fabulous. It has auto depth enhancer and ultra clear panel technology and all that nonsense. So what do I think? Well, what do I think? Well, I think this is an amazing TV. the clarity and the way the content that it's delivering to you, that's being fed from it, and regardless of what that is, whether it's HD or 4K or HDR, it's really strong and vivid. In terms of the upscaling from HD to 4K, which a lot of us will be doing an awful lot of, it does that so very well. In fact, it's hard, unless you have a direct side-by-side comparison from 4K and HD, to tell that you're really watching a HD content. It does upscale so incredibly well. It also does an admirable job of upscaling from standard definition to 4K. Obviously, you can tell it's been, it was standard definition content, but really it does an incredible job with that. In terms of what you're connecting it to, it's got a game mode. So if you've got a PlayStation Pro or an Xbox or even a Switch or whatever, its response time is really quick, and it really ups its game on games. You get none of that awful lag or blurring or anything like that. It really is fabulous with games. In fact, I would say this is probably the best gaming TV out there. So yeah, what would I give this? I would give this an 8. I think it probably would have got a 9 if they didn't include this rattle. Which you can watch the video where I'm going on about how poor this is. It's a Bluetooth remote control. They do have a normal remote control with it, just a bog standard one that you get with it. But you'd think if you're spending this kind of money on a TV that you would at least get a decent remote. But sadly, they've given you one where the batteries keep falling out. You have to resync it all the time, or at least a few times. But other than that, it's a decent remote. It works pretty well. But that's when it's working. It's getting it to work is the issue. So it would be a 9 if this was an awful lot better. But it's an 8. It's still a brilliant TV. If you're in the market for a 4K TV, I really wouldn't bother so much with the latest ones. This is a great buy, even though it's last year's model and it's not that old as it is. You can get some great deals on this TV right now. Obviously, with a 4K TV, the bigger the better, because it's just fabulous. They get so much real estate and see it. And movies sort of really pop and punch out to you, especially when they're being fed content from a 4K Blu-ray player, which is the Samsung 18500, which is another one I'll be reviewing very soon. So, yeah, so I'm going to give it 8 out of 10. It's a great TV. I really love it. It's one of my favorite purchases that I've made in a very, very long time. So that's it. We'll be back on Tuesday with another video. It's a Tuesday tantrum where I'm having a moan about tech. Then there will be some more videos coming throughout the week, Thursday Thoughts, and then another review next Friday, which will probably be the Samsung 85000 4K Blu-ray player. So that's it. Have a wonderful weekend. Don't forget to subscribe. It's that button just there. You see it? You got it? Yeah. Don't forget to watch all my other videos, which will come up after this one. And have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you next week. Thanks a lot, guys. Take care. Yum, 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 yum. Fantastics. Yeah.